Now, are you a mid or high handicap golfer that struggles to hit greens? Well, now might be a good time to invest in a new set of game improvement irons. And as you can see, I've got 10 of the latest models here in front of me. I'm going to test and compare all of them to see the subtle differences in performance between them and which one might be suitable for your game. We're going to test them on the launch monitor and on the golf course to see exactly how they perform. So without further ado, let's dive into the different categories, starting with the looks. So starting with the looks, all 10 of these game improvement irons definitely inspire confidence through size. A lot of them have slightly different shapes depending on what you look for from an iron down at address. So you've got some slightly less traditional shapes in the Callaway Rogue ST Max, maybe the Wilson D9 have quite a thick top line, lots of offset. If you want to go down that route, you have those options there. And then you have some more traditional looking irons, maybe geared towards a slightly lower handicapper in the Titleist T300, the Mizuno JPX 921 Hot Metal. Both those slightly more compact, a little bit more traditional in the way they set down behind the board, and the others are somewhere in between. There's obviously a variety of different finishes on there as well, ranging from the Stealth, which is quite a dark finish at address, all the way up to things like the Mizuno and the Cleveland, which are quite light finishes. The Cleveland in particular is probably the longest from heel to toe, so if you like to look down on a lot of metal behind the board in terms of that heel to toe spacing, you're going to get a lot of confidence from the Cleveland Launcher XL. Worth just mentioning the Srixon ZX4 and the Cobra King LTDX. Both of them in the 7-iron, you can just see the back of the sole poking through behind the top line, which would be even more the case in the longer irons, so just something to be a bear in mind if that's not something you necessarily want to look down on. You might want to avoid those, but having tested them, you do soon forget about that feature as you go through the hitting process. So, you know, lots to like about these game improvement irons. They will inspire a lot of confidence, but for me personally, as a lower handicapper, I'm obviously going to gravitate towards those slightly more compact, more traditional looking irons, and therefore the Titleist T300 and the Mizuno JPX 921 Hot Metal stand out for me. And if I had to go for a winner, it would probably just about be the Mizuno. Now we move on to the sound and feel, and the first thing I'd say is that if you are a mid or high handicap golfer thinking about upgrading to any of these 10 irons, you will be absolutely blown away by the feel of these golf clubs. As someone who plays more of a better player, kind of softer feeling club, I was absolutely amazed at how fast these irons feel. I really enjoyed testing all of them, but what I was also surprised about was how there was quite a stark difference between the softer feeling irons within this test and then some of the louder, harder feeling irons. There was quite a stark contrast there. So like starting with the softer feeling clubs, you've got like the Mizuno JPX 921 Hot Metal. Still felt quite fast and stable, but had a relatively gentle, soft sound to it. So if you prefer that, almost, not quite a Forge-like feel, but it's closer than a lot of the others in this test, maybe go down that route. And then you've got some quite loud clubs that I noticed testing outdoors. The Ping G425, Titleist T300 offer quite a loud sound to it, impact, which again won't be to everyone's taste, but if you like to feel a lot of power through sound, you might want to gravitate towards those clubs. And then there were some ones that just felt really fast, and there were three that really stood out for me. It was the Cobra King LTDX, the Wilson D9 and the Callaway Rogue ST Max. The Rogue ST Max, if I had to pick one for the most amount of wow factor off the face, undoubtedly it was the Callaway. It didn't necessarily feel soft, it just felt really lively. It felt like I was hitting a fairway wood or a hybrid, it felt that fast. Had quite a loud kind of clicky metallic sound to it, but again, it was just the one that really struck me when I was hitting shots outdoors. It just felt the most energetic off the face, and it gave me a lot of distance as well. Hitting outdoors to a green, it was flying a little bit further than a lot of the others irons in this test. We'll come on to the performance a little bit later, but yeah, that was the one that really stood out for me. And then all the other irons in this test were kind of somewhere in between. They were not too hard, not too soft, somewhere in the middle, but didn't really blow me away in terms of what they were offering or really stand out versus the competition. So if I had to pick my favourite feeling club based on the additional testing I've done here outside, probably would be the Callaway Rogue ST Max, just for that wow factor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through each of the irons in this test alphabetically, talking through what I liked, what I didn't like about the performance based on the launch monitor data, but also the testing that I did outdoors. So starting with the Callaway Rogue ST Max. Again, I think it's more the looks and the feel that makes this iron stand out from the crowd. In terms of the performance, there wasn't really much that kind of really stood out. It was pretty long. It was probably longer than average versus the competition, but it wasn't super long. It was relatively low spinning. Quite consistent, but didn't really have the wow factor in terms of the performance. It was more the feel that did that. Then we move on to the Cleveland. This was surprising in terms of it wouldn't really give me the distance that I was looking for. Part of that would be down to the fact that it's slightly weaker in loft versus a lot of them. It's 29 degrees in the 7.9, but it was quite fast off the face, quite stable and relatively enjoyable to hit. Move on to the Cobra. Now that was one of the longest irons on the test we saw from the data earlier, and that was replicated out on the golf course. Really fast off the face. Again, low spinning, you'd expect that from the loft. I did struggle with dispersion a little bit with the Cobra, so I just struggled to just manage my accuracy a little bit with that club. But I would say it's still relatively forgiving, but I think that might have been down to user error. Then we move on to the Honma. Now this is actually very accurate, so it felt pretty good. Doesn't really have the wow factor off the face, but it was very consistent, and it felt like I was in quite good control of the club face as I was swinging it for whatever reason. I hit quite a lot of accurate shots for this. Again, it's middle of the road in terms of distance. We move on to the Mizuno. Again, surprisingly forgiving for what is probably one of the smaller clubs on test. Really good feel, a strong penetrating flight, about average in terms of distance, but I felt confident over the ball with it, and I could definitely hit a lot of shots that found the green with that club versus a lot of the others which tended to curve offline a lot. We move on to the Ping, and the Ping G425 I'd say had a noticeably higher flight than the others, so should give you a little bit more stopping power into greens. And I think when you've got all these irons are relatively low spinning, so having a little bit more stopping power is definitely going to help you. It's very forgiving off centre, so that extra stability you get when you don't quite catch the middle of the club face is going to be helpful, especially if you're a mid to high handicapper who misses a lot of greens. So I'd definitely say if you're looking for the most user-friendly club, probably the Ping G425 would be right up there. Then we move on to the Srixon ZX4. Again, kind of middle of the road in terms of distance. I'd say probably the thing that made it stood out was the feel. It was quite hot than the others, and very forgiving through the turf. It's got quite a wide sole to it with a little bit of camber as well, so just gives you a little bit more forgiveness through the turf. If you're catching it a little bit heavy, you get a bit more margin for error on your strike with the Srixon ZX4. Then move on to the TaylorMade Stealth. This is probably one of the standout options in terms of accuracy. I had really good control of my direction with this club. It was very consistent, and actually slight mishits heel or toe, low or high in the face, seemed to have a little impact on where the balls were finishing and flying. So there were shots that I thought I mishit with the Stealth. I thought would come up short in the front bunker. That actually carried the bunker. So you're getting a quite uniform performance with the TaylorMade Stealth. And it definitely stood out in terms of that regard, that dispersion left to right, but also front to back. The Titleist T300, again, very consistent. The thing that probably let it down was the sound. It was noticeably louder than a lot of the others on test, very loud. But in terms of consistency of the performance, it was very accurate, it was repeatable. The windows were very small in terms of where I saw the ball flight coming up into. It was mid-flight, but it was very consistent. And when I looked up, it was going through the window as I was expecting it to, which is very important when you're hitting iron shots. You want to be able to predict the outcomes, and it was very consistent in that regard. And last but by no means least is the Wilson D9. This really stands out in terms of ball speed and distance. Again, it was relatively low spinning, which might limit the playability in terms of a mid to high handicapper who's hitting a lot of the face, might find that shots curve offline a little bit more. You don't really get that forgiveness from the Wilson D9, but it's a very large head, so you get a lot of confidence through side. It's very strong loft. It's probably going to be one of the longest irons you'll test, even though it's a carryover product from last year. That, along with the Cobra, were the two that really stood out in terms of distance. So if you're looking for more help, more distance on your iron shots, the Wilson D9 is probably the way to go, along with the Cobra. If I had to pick one for my favourite all-round performance, at a push, it probably would be the TaylorMade Stealth. Not only was it long, it gave me low spin to give me good distance, but it wasn't too low spinning. It was very consistent, it was very accurate. And those are things I'm kind of really looking for from an iron. It needs to be consistent, it needs to hit those distances repeatedly. And that, alongside the Titleist and the Mizuno, it really delivered that. But if I had to push myself for a winner for overall performance, it would be the TaylorMade Stealth. So now we're moving on to value for money. Which club within this test offers the best value pound for pound in terms of the performance that you're getting? It's worth pointing out that actually a lot of these irons come in around about that £800, £850 or about $1,000 depending on your currency, which actually versus a lot of irons on the market is relatively cheap. But there were a couple that I would say really stood out in terms of what they offered and sitting at slightly lower price points. So the first would be the Wilson D9. This is probably going to be one of the longest irons that you'll hit out of everything this year. I mean, it's a carryover product from last year, but still I think versus the competition this year, I think this will still be one of the longest irons that you'll test. It's obviously quite strong, but it's very forgiving and it gives you good launch as well. It's got these power holes here on the front of the sole here, which definitely help give you a bit more launch. It's not going to be the best feeling club. It definitely feels powerful, maybe not quite as soft as you might expect, and it comes in, you know, a relatively good price. But the one that really stands out for value for money is this Cleveland Launcher XL. So for an English pounds, this comes in at like £500, which is a good deal cheaper than a lot of the irons in this test, or all of these irons in this test. And while it wasn't the longest, I found it to be very consistent, and it's a very good looking club. It looks really inviting down behind the ball. It's got a lot of shelf appeal. It's got a lot of face area to hit. So if you tend to miss in the heel or toe, you're going to be really encouraged by the fact you've got a lot of face area to play with on this club. And if you go through a fitting, you'll definitely be able to eke out a few more yards. And it's got this VT sole here, which I think definitely helps just give you a little bit more margin for error on your strike, especially if you catch the ball slightly heavy. So all in all, it's a really good club for the money, coming in a lot less than the other clubs in this test. So for value for money, it would have to be the Cleveland Launcher XL. So now we move on to the overall verdict, where I'm going to be forced to pick my overall favourite game improvement iron of 2022, which is a very difficult decision because I really enjoy hitting all 10 of these irons, and actually there were attributes that all 10 of them possess that would make me recommend them to someone looking for a new game improvement iron. Obviously it depends really what you're looking for, but obviously I have to really pick the one that kind of ticks the most boxes and excelled in the most areas, and for me probably at a push would be the TaylorMade Stealth. I say at a push because it's probably not the best looking club down at address, but that aside, I think it's probably the best all-round package in terms of offering really good distance, a really good feel. It's a very solid, explosive feel, but it's not too hard or harsh. And then the resulting ball flight and consistency of that ball flight definitely elevates it above most of the other irons in this test. It was long, it was stable, it was very accurate, and it gave me a nice blend of stopping power and distance. It's a little bit on the low spin side, but shots didn't seem to be getting away from me too much. And that's probably why I would pick this club over the others. The irons that really pushed it all the way, there were quite a few I would say. It's probably the Callaway Rogue ST Max, the Titleist T300, the Ping G425, and then you've got that Wilson for like the wow factor and the distance for the price. So don't get me wrong, there was a lot to like about a lot of these irons, but if pushed for my overall favourite game improvement iron of 2022, it would be the TaylorMade Stealth. Make sure you click the like button if you like what you're watching. Do subscribe to the Golf Monthly YouTube channel if you haven't already, because then you won't miss any of our equipment review videos. But from Birdie Park Golf Club here in Stamford, I'll see you next time.